There's something uniquely frustrating about gear that doesn't live up to the name stamped on the slide, especially when you've paid good money for it, read the hype, and expected at least basic reliability. Firearms aren't like phone cases. You don't buy one just to toss it in a drawer when it sucks. You depend on it, whether it's for self-defense, duty, or just peace of mind on the range. But every now and then, a pistol comes along that just misses. Bad design, poor execution, or worse, dangerous flaws that somehow made it past quality control. So today, we're going to take a closer look at a few handguns that I personally wouldn't recommend in 2025. Not because they're the worst guns ever made, but because they fail where it matters most. Safety, reliability, confidence in your hands. Let's jump into the list. And if you're a fan of any of these, hey, don't take it personally. I'm just calling it like I see it. Coming in at number 6 on the list is the KelTec P15. And if there's one word that keeps coming up when I talk about this pistol, it's unfinished. KelTec has always had a reputation for thinking outside the box. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes you end up with a gun that feels like it skipped beta testing. The P15 was marketed as one of the lightest double-stacked 9mm pistols on the market, and technically that's true. It's slim, it's light, and it carries 15 rounds in a surprisingly compact package. But once you actually shoot it, the flaws show up fast. The trigger is spongy and inconsistent, with a break that feels more like a guess than a clean wall. The grip texture is slick enough that you'll feel it shifting under recoil, especially with hotter loads. And that recoil, combined with the gun's ultralight frame, makes follow-up shots harder than they need to be. The slide is also known to wobble under stress, which doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Then there's the sights. They're basic, hard to replace, and sit low enough that they don't do the gun any favors in fast target transitions. Reliability was another mixed bag. While some units ran fine, others had feeding issues straight out of the box. And when a defensive pistol has feeding problems, that's a red flag, not a quirk. There's also a distinct lack of aftermarket support. Finding replacement parts, compatible holsters, or upgraded sights isn't just difficult, it's borderline discouraging. For a carry gun, being limited in customization or repair options is more than a nuisance. It's another reason this pistol feels unfinished and unpolished compared to others in its category. Overall, the KelTec P15 is a good idea, executed with just enough shortcuts to make it a bad recommendation. It's a lightweight 9mm that tries to do too much on too little foundation. For a few bucks more, you can get a Glock 43X or a SIG P365 and skip the guesswork. KelTec swung for the fences here. Unfortunately, this one feels like a foul ball off the grip panel. Number 5 is the Diamondback DB9. A pistol that proves small doesn't always mean smart. On paper, the DB9 checks all the boxes. It's ultra-concealable, chambered in 9mm, and weighs less than some pocket knives. But once you put rounds through it, reality sets in quickly. This isn't a gun built for long-term use, or even medium-term use, for that matter. The DB9 is incredibly snappy for its size. That's expected in a micro 9mm. But here, it crosses the line into uncomfortable. The frame flexes under recoil, and the tiny grip doesn't offer enough surface area to maintain a steady hold. The lack of a slide lock or manual safety also limits its practicality for many shooters. Build quality is a recurring concern. Several users have reported cracked frames and excessive wear after just a few hundred rounds. Internal parts, especially springs and pins, show signs of fatigue much earlier than they should. Even basic maintenance can feel like a chore, with takedown pins that sometimes refuse to cooperate. Accuracy is acceptable at very close range, but that's about it. The sights are minimal and difficult to use under pressure. As for reliability, it's hit or miss. Some DB9s run fine for a while, others start choking early, and when a gun this small can't be trusted to fire consistently, its purpose as a carry gun starts to fall apart. The DB9 isn't marketed as a duty gun or range toy. It's supposed to be a last resort defensive tool. But when your last resort might jam, crack, or just beat your hand up every time you pull the trigger, that's a problem. Small doesn't have to mean scary, but with the DB9, every trigger pull feels like rolling the dice. It's the kind of gun you carry because it's light, not because you trust it. And when it comes to personal defense, confidence matters just as much as caliber. Unfortunately, this one trades confidence for compactness, and it's not a good deal. Taking the number 4 spot is the Remington R51, a gun that promised a bold comeback for a legendary name, and instead delivered something that feels like it got lost on the way to quality control. The R51 wasn't just a letdown, it was a full-on public relations faceplant. When Remington reintroduced the R51, they pushed it as a modern take on a classic design with some historic pedigree. And on paper, the specs didn't sound bad. Compact 9mm, sleek design, and a locking breech system that was supposed to soften recoil. Supposed to. In practice, it felt more like someone tried to reinvent the wheel and ended up with a triangle. The recoil impulse is weirdly sharp for a gun this size. The slide feels like it's dragging a lawn chair behind it. And if you manage to get through a full magazine without a malfunction, you might want to buy a lottery ticket too. The R51's biggest problem is consistency, or the lack thereof. It jams, it stovepipes, it double feeds, and when it's not doing any of that, it still manages to feel like it's about to. That tension isn't what you want in a carry gun. It's what you feel when you lend your car to a friend who can't drive a stick. The trigger is mushy, with an awkward reset that feels like it's playing hide and seek. The slide serrations are slick, and the grip angle feels off, like someone tried to make a 1911 do yoga and forgot the ending pose. Remington eventually put out a Gen 2 to fix the problems. And to their credit, it is slightly better, but only in the sense that stepping in a puddle is better than falling into a lake. The R51 isn't a complete disaster, but it sure is close. In 2025, there are just too many reliable, compact 9mm out there to gamble on something that spent more time in damage control than on the firing line. Coming in at number 3 is the Taurus 247 series, a pistol that probably should have stayed in the concept phase a little longer. It's the kind of gun that makes you wonder if the engineers and the lawyers ever sat in the same room before hitting send to market. The 247 isn't new, and to be fair, it doesn't look all that bad at first glance. It's a polymer frame, hammer-fired handgun with decent ergonomics, and a double-action, single-action trigger. Sounds all right, right? Well, the devil is in the details. And in this case, the details involve a recall, multiple lawsuits, and an unfortunate tendency to go bang when it wasn't supposed to. One of the biggest red flags with the 247 series is its track record for accidental discharges, sometimes when dropped, and allegedly, sometimes even when the safety was engaged. That's not just concerning, that's a deal breaker. A carry gun should never make you nervous just because it's loaded and holstered. Trigger feel isn't much better. The double-action pull is long and heavy. The single-action brake is inconsistent. And the reset feels like it's somewhere in another zip code. Combine that with a mushy safety lever, and you've got a gun that never quite inspires trust. Reliability is hit or miss. Some people report decent performance with the right ammo, but many others experienced failures to feed, light primer strikes, and lockup issues with the rotating barrel system. That inconsistency only makes the safety issues worse. You don't just have to worry about it firing when it shouldn't. You also have to worry about it not firing when it should. To be fair, Taurus has made solid improvements in their newer models, but the 247 series isn't one of them. It's a relic from a time when cost-cutting sometimes got in the way of common sense. The legacy of the 247 is one of warnings and recalls, not reliability. Even if you get one that runs well, it carries the baggage of a flawed track record. Taurus has come a long way since, but this particular model is like an X you don't want to run into. It brings too much history and not enough growth. Sliding into second place is the Springfield Prodigy, a gun that many hoped would bring the 2011 platform to the masses, but ended up feeling more like a group project where nobody finished their part. It promised staccato vibes on a Springfield budget, And unfortunately, it delivered more frustration than firepower. On paper, it's got all the right ingredients. Optics ready, double-stack 9mm, 1911 inspired controls. And about the aesthetics? Absolutely on point. The Prodigy looks like it means business. But once you start pulling the trigger, reality sets in. And it's a little rough around the edges. Or, more accurately, rough all over. The biggest issue people run into with the Prodigy is reliability. It's not just the occasional jam. We're talking about frequent feeding problems, slide drag, misaligned parts, and magazines that sometimes play a game of will they seat today? That's a real buzzkill when you're expecting competition-level performance. The trigger is another mixed bag. It's not terrible, but it's nowhere near what most shooters expect from a 2011-style pistol. There's take-up, a slightly gritty wall, and a break that doesn't quite live up to the platform's reputation. Some users report slide-to-frame fitment that feels unfinished, and others end up with optics mounting issues out of the box. It's frustrating because the Prodigy really should have worked. The concept was strong, the styling is great, the support for modern optics is a nice touch. But what you get out of the box often requires immediate upgrades, troubleshooting, or just plain patience. And for the price, hovering in the $1,300 to $2,500 range depending on setup, it doesn't exactly scream value. To Springfield's credit, they've issued improvements and addressed some of the early issues in later batches. But even the updated models don't always live up to the Prodigy name. More like a promising intern who needs a lot more training before taking over the job. In theory, it was the 2011 for the everyman. In practice, it was the 2011 for the warranty department. Springfield aimed high, but this launch needed another few laps in testing before prime time. If you're willing to put in aftermarket work, it can shine, but needs fixing out of the box isn't a great selling point at this price. In a year where great striker-fired pistols and true 2011s exist in almost every price range, the Prodigy just doesn't stand out, for the right reasons anyway. At the top of the list, we've got the SIG P320, easily one of the most controversial pistols of the last decade. Now, before anyone grabs their pitchforks, let's be clear, this isn't about bashing SIG as a company. They've made some phenomenal firearms, but about the P320? That's a different story altogether. The concept behind the P320 is genuinely clever. A modular chassis system that lets you swap grip frames, slide lengths, calibers, all while keeping the same serialized fire control unit. That's forward-thinking design, no doubt. And on the surface, the gun feels modern, clean, and practical. But that cleverness comes with baggage. Heavy baggage. The biggest issue that continues to haunt the P320 is its unintended discharge problem. Yes, SIG has issued upgrades. Yes, there have been changes. But it's hard to ignore the number of lawsuits, law enforcement agencies stepping away from it, and well-documented cases where the gun allegedly fired without the trigger being pulled. Now, to be fair, most production models sold today include the updated striker and drop safety improvements. But let's not pretend the story ends there. The modular design, while cool, also means more moving parts, more chances for fitment issues, and more opportunity for tolerance stacking to do strange things under stress. The trigger, for a striker-fired gun, is decent. But when the gun's safety history is under question, decent doesn't cut it. Confidence matters, especially if this is something you carry every day or depend on professionally. In terms of recoil and accuracy, the P320 shoots fine. That's not the problem. The problem is peace of mind. When a firearm earns a reputation for unpredictability, rightly or wrongly, it takes a toll on trust. And that's something you can't fix with optics plates or tungsten grips. The P320 isn't unusable, but in 2025, with so many safe, proven, and equally modular options out there, it's hard to justify this much risk for this much money. Even if it doesn't fire itself anymore, the reputation it carries tends to shoot holes in your confidence. Not every gun earns its keep, and some barely deserve shelf space, let alone holster time. Whether it's poor design, spotty reliability, or safety concerns that just won't die. The truth is simple. There are better options out there. The 6 handguns on this list didn't make it here because they were unpopular or misunderstood. They're here because too many shooters have had the same issues, and too many red flags are hard to ignore. Some of these pistols looked great on paper. A few even shot well, when they felt like it. But consistency matters. And if you're trusting a firearm with your safety, your training hours, or your hard-earned money, it shouldn't feel like a gamble every time you hit the range. If you've had a different experience with any of these, more power to you. A good sample doesn't erase the pattern. But I'm always open to hearing from people who've had better luck. So now I want to hear from you. What's the one gun you wish you hadn't bought? Or better yet, what's the one that let you down when it mattered most? Drop it in the comments below. Stay safe, shoot straight, and for the love of common sense, get something that works.